this video, we will be discussing the life, music, and activism of Cyndi Lauper, an artist that struggled for years and got her break relatively late in life. When she finally did in the early 80s, she burst into the public consciousness and quickly became a new wave icon through her amazing voice, outrageous fashion, campy aesthetic, and tough gal attitude. And whenever I'm blasting all through the night on my AirPods as I stroll through the gentrified boroughs of New York City, I am overwhelmed by how hauntingly beautiful it sounds. It's at this moment I pause, adjust my fingerless fishnet gloves, and think to myself, I can't get it out of my head. Cyndi Lauper was born in Brooklyn, New York on June 22, 1953. At a young age, her father exited the picture, leaving her mother alone to raise 3 children. They soon relocated to Queens. Apparently, her childhood was fraught and difficult, and even abusive at times. Her mother's subsequent partners and boyfriends were often the source of this problematic home life for Cyndi, her older sister, and her younger brother. In response to her tumultuous situation, Cyndi often acted out and was described by her sister as being very strong-willed. Both her and her sister were bonded through this situation and also through music. They shared a guitar which they took turns playing and writing songs on. She eventually left home when she was 17. After leaving home, Cyndi only faced more problems, remarking in several interviews that she was homeless for at least a short period of time. And even though she was expelled from high school, she earned her GED and spent some time at college and university. She never graduated though, and supported herself working odd jobs. She began singing with various cover bands. One, called Doc West, featured Cyndi belting out her best impersonation of Janis Joplin. But being an untrained vocalist, she ended up blowing out her voice completely. Doctors at the time said that she might not be able to sing again. During this time, she contacted a voice coach, and within a year, she got her voice back up to full strength again. At the start of the 1980s, she began singing with a band called Blue Angel. This band was, in my opinion, a great vehicle for Lauper's newfound vocal strength. Clips that I've seen of the band performing live showcase Lauper's vocal power and seem to go over well with most audiences. To be honest, it reminded me a bit of seeing Bjork performing with her early band, the Sugar Cubes. Blue Angel tried for several years, but failed to achieve a greater level of success. And at this time, Lauper was already making a name for herself in certain circles. And eventually, the pressure for her to leave the group and pursue her own solo career became too great. It was around this time that Lauper met David Wolff, who took over as her manager and whom she eventually married. It was Wolff who negotiated her first record contract with Portrait Records, a subsidiary of Epic, in 1981. And at the ripe old age of 28, Cyndi Lauper signed her first record contract. Shortly after being signed, the label sought out a producer for her debut LP, She's So Unusual. The name Rick Chertoff came to mind, and it was decided that he would take on the production duties. After being asked, Chertoff remarked that he had, quote, a locked drawer full of songs looking for the right singer, end quote. And anyone listening to this album can definitely hear that. It's chock full of good songs. One of those songs was All Through the Night by Jules Shear, a song that was recorded a year or so earlier and was produced by Todd Rundgren and featured Elliot Easton, one of the founding members of The Cars. The Cars actually recorded a version of this song that they never released. Before you go looking for it on the internet, I have tried for the past few years to find this long-lost version of All Through the Night by The Cars and have been unsuccessful. So, in the comments, if you have access to this or you know where to find it, please post it because I'm dying to hear it. And now we're going to get into the big chart toppers. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the original song Time After Time, which was written by Lauper and keyboardist Rob Hyman, who provided the signature male vocal harmony on the song. The song apparently was developed in the last few hours of the recording session for the album. The record company knew that they needed one more song, and there was talk actually of including another cover song provided probably by Chertoff. But Cyndi Lauper insisted that this song be an original song. The song also features lyrics that were based on conversations that were had in the studio while they were writing the song. So for instance, the iconic line, "the second hand unwinds," was taken from a phrase that was uttered by Chertoff. He was looking at his watch and remarking that time was not passing or passing very slowly. So he said, "the second hand is unwinding." But it's just a great lyric for that song. It's one of the best lyrics in my opinion. But these grinding last few hours of the recording session did pay off as the song reached #1. However, not before the success of the album's first single and probably Lauper's most well-known song. It's time to say hello to the sponsor for this video, Rubbish Shirts. Are you a fan of pop culture? Do you often make references to music and movies that no one else remembers or has even heard of before? Are you or someone you love a sucker for ironic and or humorous clothing? Then you need to visit Rubbish Shirts. You can find their store on both Etsy and eBay. Rubbish Shirts has over 200 designs that reference movies, music, books, slang, or just weird stuff. That's why their motto is "Weird Shirts for Cool Jerks." They've got designs featuring your favorite music artists like Steve Winwood, Jeff Lynne, Graham Parsons, Guided by Voices, Weezer, Biggie, Tribe Called Quest, and more. Be the life of your next party or just give them as a gift to your family or significant other. Start a conversation with a complete stranger about Van Halen, or have a chuckle with your bestie about your shared appreciation for Funyuns. Every Rubbish shirt is factory printed on quality Fruit of the Loom HD cotton shirts. The colors don't fade, and the pre-shrunk heavy cotton shirts stand up to many, many wash and dry loads. How do I know so much about Rubbish shirts? Well, as a matter of fact, I make them. Head over to Etsy or eBay and search for Rubbish Shirts, or click the link below in the video's notes. Rubbish Shirts. They're weird shirts for cool jerks. Girls Just Want to Have Fun was written by Robert Hazard of the band The Heroes. It was Chertoff's idea to have Cyndi sing the song, but the original version was written from a male perspective, and she initially hated it. But they reworked it, changed the arrangement, and transformed it into the chart-topping girl power anthem that it later became. The development of this song is indicative of Lauper's insistence on making music that expressed her inner world, but also spoke to her moral sense of the broader world as well. It's also a great example of how a difference in arrangement can change the entire vibe of a track. The original version of the song was played in a sort of palm-muted punk style, very straightforward. But by adding bright sonic elements and changing the rhythm to a reggae-esque backbeat, they infused the song with this almost carnivalesque atmosphere. The music video for the song, the very first one to feature closed captioning for the hearing impaired, features her dancing through the streets of New York City, followed by a cast of women that was relatively diverse for the time. It was Cyndi's desire, even early on, that her audience see themselves in her videos. The mother character in the video is played by her actual mother, and her father is played by wrestling manager Captain Lou Albano. Cyndi met Albano by chance on a plane ride from Puerto Rico back to the United States when she was with the band Blue Angel. In the weeks following Girls Just Want to Have Fun's release, it still wasn't getting enough airplay on many radio stations. So, Cyndi and her manager/boyfriend David Wolf turned to Albano to help promote the album by featuring Lauper on several World Wrestling Federation spots on TV. He is also the one who introduced Lauper to Pee Wee Herman. These wrestling television appearances are very funny and show off Lauper's unique and idiosyncratic personality. Something that can't be overlooked about her is that her high-pitched, nasally New York accent is actually quite funny. Not only that, but her comedic timing and flair for spouting off non sequiturs makes these spots jump through the screen at you. In other television interviews she gave at the time on shows like The Tonight Show and the David Letterman program also showcase this quirky aspect of her personality, and it shines through. Because of this, she was often invited back on these shows, not only as a musical guest, but also as a regular guest sitting next to the host. Another example of her brilliant cross-promotional marketing style was her decision to make the theme song for the 80s movie classic The Goonies. My family had The Goonies on VHS when I was growing up, and I've probably seen the film more times than almost any other movie. Looking back at the promotional videos that she made for the song, I was struck by the fact that many of the scenes in the video are direct recreations of scenes from the movie itself, some of them even featuring the main cast members. I should also say a few things here about her unique fashion sense. Lauper often wore bright colors with clashing patterns, wild hairstyles, avant-garde makeup, and an almost distracting amount of jewelry and accessories. In fact, a few years later, when Lauper was recording the star-studded hit We Are the World, producer Quincy Jones was struggling to find the source of a clicking sound on the studio recording. It was later revealed that the clicking was coming from Lauper's wide assortment of bangles and bracelets. Lauper's second album, True Colors, was released in 1986, and even though the title track for the album was penned by Billy Steinberg and Tom Kelly, CYNDI performed the song as a tribute to her friend Gregory Nadal, who died of AIDS around that time. The song has been adopted by the LGBTQ community since, and is thought of as a queer anthem. The second single for the LP was another one of my personal favorites of hers, the song Change of Heart, which, even though it wasn't an original, it's another example of her ability to transmute her own personal pain into catharsis. And it's just got a great hook. It's a little bit darker, but I think it's one of her better earlier singles. But Lauper was given production credit on this album along with Lenny Pence, so that's also evidence of the fact that she's starting to take more creative control over her music. After the release of True Colors, Lauper debuted in her first role on the big screen with the 80s comedy hit Vibes. It was directed by Ken Kappas and stars Lauper, Jeff Goldblum, and Peter Falk. And if this sounds like a winning combination for a quirky 80s comedy, you are correct, sir. I have been obsessed with this movie since I watched it for the first time a few years ago. The plot revolves around two psychics, played by Lauper and Goldblum, who are hired by Falk to uncover an ancient treasure in Peru. The movie is just simply fantastic, and in every scene, Lauper is demonstrating her outrageous and unique sense of fashion. Even though this film is still panned by critics, please go watch it immediately after viewing this video. A Night to Remember, Lauper's third LP, sees her taking on even more creative control. And just like the last LP, she is given the production credit and even writes the majority of the material. But to me, unfortunately, this album does fall short. There's not a lot of standout songs, and I just feel that they don't have the vivacious, quirky, girl power energy of the first album. And it could be perhaps a result of the fact that her marriage had ended. Her marriage to David Wolff was over, and even some of the songs on the album are about the ending of their relationship. It's at this point in the video where I'm actually going to stop critiquing her albums one by one. That's not to say that these albums don't have a certain appeal to a certain person, but I personally do not find them as interesting. That's not to say that they're not good or that there's not good songs on them, but I think, to me, she is making such a departure from her original sound. artists should certainly feel free to grow and develop their sound and take on different styles, but I think that there's just such a difference from album to album, even song to song. I think there is even a difference in the way she sings. Many of these songs, if you were just to play them for me, I wouldn't even be able to tell that it was her singing. The styles go anywhere from like women's empowerment of the early to mid 90s, to techno, to club remixes, to blues albums, to American song canon cover albums, to folk, to bluegrass. I would say probably my favorite of these is her bluegrass tribute to her own music, where she plays dulcimer, and there's a lot of other famous people that sit in with her. But beyond that, there's not much from her 90s period on that I find particularly all that interesting. The next obvious question is why? What is going on? Why is Cyndi Lauper trying all these different styles? Why is she singing in someone else's voice sometimes, seemingly? And when I watched the Paramount Plus documentary about Lauper's career, she sort of alludes to this question a few times without directly talking about it. But in general, she seems to say that what she was trying to do was sing more serious music about a deeper place in her soul. And which I'm not going to sit here and tell an artist that they're not allowed to do that. In fact, I would say that Cyndi Lauper has always been doing that. The fact that you have an artist like Cyndi Lauper, who on her very first record writes and releases a song like Time After Time, it's hard to argue that this person is not in touch with a darker side or in touch with a more deeper part of her soul. That really does come through, even on the first record. Even though it's super fun at times, it's also serious. And I think she could have still mined this material without abandoning her personality, her public persona, which, sometimes a pop artist is kind of assigned a public persona, or the public defines what your persona is. I just always felt from the jump that she was really in the driver's seat. Even though she was a little bit younger, she was less experienced, I think that she comes through. Her personality comes through. I don't think it's fake. I don't think it's a marketing campaign. And it's disappointing to me as a fan of her early work to see this progression through the later albums. But I digress. And even though she didn't find commercial success through her music during this period, she did find it in other places. For instance, she won an Emmy for the character she played on the hit romantic comedy show Mad About You. She also received a Tony Award for the song she contributed to the Broadway musical hit Kinky Boots. And in addition to this, she has also become an advocate for LGBTQ rights, marriage equality, and poverty. She's even spoken at the White House several times and in front of Congress, and she has played a pivotal role in passing the Defense of Marriage Act. Personally, I feel that if more celebrities use their fame and stature to highlight issues like Lauper has done, then the world would be a much better place. In my heart, Cyndi Lauper will always be the quirky, tough little ragamuffin from Queens that didn't take shit from anyone and courageously influenced style and culture through the power of her voice and the strength of her conviction. And, let's face it, some really, really amazing songs. And when I think about Cyndi Lauper and her outrageous take on new wave rock and roll, I think to myself, I can't get it out of my head. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Be sure to check out our sponsor Rubbish Shirts, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.